Hey Wolfpack, and welcome back. It's finally Saturday. I've been looking forward to this weekend all week, that's for sure. So today, we're reading 3 paranormal stories. Before we start, what is your paranormal story? Have you had any encounters? Comment down below, I'd love to hear them, as I've had plenty myself. So with that said, whether you're sitting around a campfire, on the night shift, or even laying in bed, let my voice soothe your nightmares. Sean lived on the wild side. Every sign stating "do not enter" was just an open invitation to find out what people were hiding. He was a natural-born explorer who was always up for the next adventure. His best friend Luke was adventurous, but he certainly had his limits. There were places Sean wanted to explore that Luke had refused. There was adventurous, and then it was just stupid. The pandemic had affected them in different ways. Where it made Luke more cautious, it apparently only led to more boredom and wishes to have fun in Sean. That wasn't all it did, though. Luke was a non-essential worker. He was tight for cash, which led to a bit of a problem for him. It was Sean's birthday, and he didn't have the money to get his best friend a gift. Luckily, what Sean really wanted didn't cost a dime. Unluckily for Luke, it was pure recklessness. Sean wanted to break in and explore the now-abandoned Lady Gertrude's Asylum. It was supposedly one of the most haunted places in America and happened to only be a town over from where they lived. Sean had wanted to go for years, but Luke had always refused. Now, Sean was asking him to go with him for his birthday, and Luke had reluctantly agreed. It was a bad idea, but what was he supposed to do? He didn't want to let Sean down. The night of Sean's birthday, they made their way over to their decrepit building. On the way, Sean kept gushing about the different legends. They say the head doctor, Dr. Myers, performed botched lobotomies. It ended up killing dozens of people. They say you can still see the doctor in his office, sorting through his paperwork. And the patients! They're said to roam the halls of the asylum, lost forever. The conditions were horrible. The death toll from preventable disease was astronomical, Sean exclaimed. Luke didn't find this nearly as exciting as apparently Sean did. Truthfully, the legends just made him sad. Still, it was Sean's birthday, so he put on a pretend smile. The massive building slowly came into view. It certainly looked creepy. Parts of the building seemed to be crumbling away, and graffiti warning about death to anyone who entered. The front door was chained shut. Sean had brought bolt cutters for this reason. They turned off the car and made their way up the crumbling stairs. Sean broke the chains, throwing the bolt cutters lazily to the side of the door as they pushed the door open. The smell of dirt and decay met their noses, leaving them in a coughing fit. Once they were able to compose themselves, they pulled out their flashlights so they could see through the pitch-black hallways. The place was creepy, with broken wheelchairs thrown about and old medical equipment encased in cobwebs. Luke had no desire to touch anything. Sean, on the other hand, was opening doors and exploring every crevice he could. Sean walked into one of the rooms when the door shut behind him, and Luke began to panic. "Sean? Can you hear me? Are you okay?" He yelled, as he tried to open the door, but it was jammed. "I'm fine." He could hear Sean's voice. "Wow, did that scare me?" he said, as if it was the most exciting thing ever. "There's another door across the room. It looks like it leads to another hall. Just meet me at Dr. Myers' office. That's the room with the big double doors on the 3rd floor. It shouldn't be hard to miss." Luke wanted to refuse, but he feared that he didn't have much choice in the matter. They couldn't get that door open. They would have to go on their own. Luke slowly made his way through the halls, looking for stairs of any kind. He felt like he had been walking forever when he heard a shuffling sound coming from around the corner. His blood turned cold and he began to shake, causing the light from his flashlight to bounce around. He took a deep breath and swiftly walked towards the sound. He let out a shriek as he ran into a girl about his age. She shrieked as well. then put her hand on her chest as if to calm her beating heart. "You scared the hell out of me!" she exclaimed. "You scared the hell out of me!" he responded back. They both took a moment to calm their breathing before Luke began to question her. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I got lost," she said. "I was with my friends when I made a wrong turn, and now I can't find them. I'm Lexi, by the way." "Luke," he replied, "and same here. I'm supposed to meet a friend up on the 3rd floor, but I have no idea where any of the stairwells are." Lexi gave a little smile. "Well, I can help you with that. I just came from the 4th floor. I'll show you to the stairs if I can stay with you. This place gives me the creeps, and I don't want to be alone," she said. Luke agreed, secretly happy to have someone with him, as he made his way through the asylum. They took off, with Lexi leading the way. "You don't seem like you really want to be here," Lexi said, making conversation. "I don't, but I'm here as a favor for a friend," Luke replied. "Well, we're in the same boat because neither of us want to be here," she said. She turned a corner and brought him to a stairwell. "Here you go. The floors are numbered, so you shouldn't have any problem finding the 3rd floor." "Aren't you coming?" he asked. She shook her head. "I'm going to try to find the exit. I've got people waiting on me. It was nice to meet you, Luke," she said, with a kind smile. "Same here," he said, as he walked into the stairwell and Lexi turned around and walked in the direction of the exit. Luke made it to the 3rd floor and immediately found the double doors labeled Dr. Myers' office. He had another mini fright as he nearly ran into Sean as he opened the doors and walked in. "Sean!" he had relieved. Sean looked up and smiled. "Any paranormal activity?" Sean looked hopeful. "Nope," replied Luke. "Damn, me neither. I guess this place is a dud. I did find some old paperwork on the patients," he said. Luke followed Sean behind a large desk when an old picture on the wall captured his attention. It showed who he assumed was Dr. Myers, with well over 100 patients, each of their names listed at the bottom of the photo. It was old, at least by 50 years. He scanned the sad faces when one made him stop in shock. He counted. 4th row, 36 from the left. It was undoubtable. He knew that face. He looked at the name printed at the bottom of the photograph. Alexis Young. He felt cold. Lexi had been lost longer than he realized. My Gramps was a paranormal debunker. He never wanted to be called an investigator. He always said, "There's nothing to investigate, only to prove wrong." He was never a believer. Putting Houdini to shame for those who weren't aware, Houdini was quite the skeptic. He knew how to explain every bump in the night or strange shadow in photos. Gramps was called to hundreds, maybe even thousands of buildings, sites, and homes throughout his career. Some people were genuinely scared of their doors slamming and paintings falling, while others wanted to test his abilities. He was always able to prove to the homeowners that the way their floors sloped allowed for the doors to slam if the windows were open, or that their paintings were hung in just drywall and eventually the nails would slip. Even the people who tried to fool him never succeeded. He found their hidden rooms or false floors, and in more modern times became quite the Photoshop expert. Whenever I became scared of a monster under the bed or in the closet, I would call Gramps and he would explain to me why I had no need to worry. He was my greatest comfort, and soon I was doing some work with him, keeping me occupied in high school. As a college student, it was great, as he was able to make it an internship for me, and I got elective credits following him into homes and learning his craft. While I didn't intend to take over the family business or anything, I was very fond of the time I spent with him. He wouldn't take me on all of his trips though, as I had other obligations. There's one trip in particular I cannot decide whether I regret not being there or am glad I missed. This is the one I want to share with you. I didn't know about 19 Fort Wood Lane until after Gramps was there. I don't think I ever would have if he hadn't meticulously created written records for each of his jobs, and this one hadn't been so well protected. I was cleaning out his rented office space last night, drowning myself in work to avoid my grief. About a week ago, Gramps had passed in a rather strange and sudden manner. A month ago, his doctor discovered a mass in his thyroid, cancer I guess, and it had begun to metastasize in both his brain and lungs. Usually, thyroid cancer can be caught early and is very treatable, so this came as a shock. However, even the best have their moments, and this was Gramps. He suffered for only a short while, passing a few weeks after the discovery. He chose not to treat it, for what I assumed to be his honor and desire to go on his own terms. Now though, I'm not too sure that's the case. He may have known treatment would be futile. As I said, I was cleaning out his office when I found the envelope, unassuming and untitled. It sat in the bottom of the desktop drawer, almost asking to be ignored. I think it was the lack of labeling that made me open it though. Everything else was dated, entitled, and this envelope lacked any of Gramps' details. Inside, I found just a few pieces of lined paper, not unlike any of his other notes and files. However, this being separate, I knew it had to be important. In his classic slanted hand cursive writing, Gramps was describing one of his more recent cases. His notes were usually quick, more note-like than story-like. As typically, he could just say hearing voices, security camera mics were hacked, or mice in the pipes causing the horrid screeching noises, along with the quick descriptions of the events. But this was different. 19 Fortwood Lane. This house should be condemned and left to rot. Not a single soul belongs here. It is the work of something I've spent my whole life denying, but I can't deny this, not anymore. Many have faked it, and there's not a chance in heaven nor hell that this is some kind of fraud. I saw things here, things which I cannot explain, and this is the place that will get me killed. I know it. Immediately, I was thrown off. This was very uncharacteristic. Gramps was never dramatic, and I had never heard him speak of 19 Fortwood Lane. The date was just over a month ago, so it had to be recent. I had seen him so many times since then, and not once did he mention it. Mrs. Penderson called me, reporting a strange figure roaming around at night. She tried to deal with it, but her husband was often away for business, and with a new baby, she had the right to be scared. I immediately thought it was an intruder, and was determined to do what I could to help Mrs. Penderson, as I could only imagine what would happen to a young woman home alone at night. I arrived on Friday night, and she insisted on staying with me and the baby. Her husband was across the country on business, and this was confirmed by location services, credible testimonies, and photographs. I performed my usual checks, but not a false door nor a loose window was to be found. We settled into the master bedroom for the night, baby asleep in her arms, while Mrs. Penderson and I sat up waiting. It came every night as she told me, so it didn't take long for me to notice something. It started as a soft sound of footsteps up and down the hall outside the closed door, as if pacing. Not the sounds of a man in boots, but rather a softer pitter-patter of a light-footed woman. Strange, as she told me it was a man in the house. After a while, the noise ceased, then started up again, this time coming from the master bathroom. Mrs. Penderson jumped, and I have to admit I was startled as well, since as far as I was aware, this room was only accessible via a door in the room we were in. How could footfalls travel from the hall to the bathroom without passing us? "It's starting," she told me. And despite the dim light, I could see the fear in her eyes, and the color drained from her face. I assured her I would catch the bastard. It was cruel to terrorize a woman like this. "Don't go in there," she said. This time, with a tremble in her voice, even the best actors couldn't fake. "I've never looked it dead on. I just know something bad will happen if you antagonize it. I called you here to prove I'm not crazy, but I don't need you to get rid of it. I'll move. We can go. I just need you to believe me. Please, let's go." I can't say she didn't warn me. "It'll be okay, miss, I promise. I just want to take a look. Whoever's in there can't hurt me, and you won't have to move. Just let me scare him off." I headed towards the bathroom, and flung open the door, reaching for the light switch. I flipped it. Finding no light came on. I tried again, up and down, noticing it wasn't working. I backed up into the bedroom, and tried that switch. It worked fine. I hadn't seen this before. I had checked, and the breaker for the bath also controlled the bedroom. The bastard must have broken the bulb. Without a second thought, I walked into the room, taking a few steps forward before feeling a rush of air and hearing the door slam behind me. I could hear Mrs. Penderson screaming, and the baby began to cry. Normally fearless in these situations, I was horrified to feel those goosebumps creeping up my spine, and noticed a slight tremble in my hands, taking a deep breath as I took another step, but was stopped immediately by a rough force. Stumbling backward, I looked around trying to adjust to the dark. Moonlight was filtering in through the slim window above the shower tile, and I could make out the details of the room. However, standing in the bathtub was something that hadn't been there before. It was a detached tub, so it wouldn't be a shower curtain or anything, and there was no chandelier or artwork on that wall. The figure was in the shape of a man, but bigger than any man I'd seen. It stood probably 8 feet tall, but incredibly slim. It may have been even taller. As I made out what looked like a top hat adorning its head, my blood ran cold as I knew this was no trick. The thing began to step towards me, and I tried to scream as it reached for my throat. Nothing came out. Instead, I felt that thing sink its hand into my skin. It was impossible. It had to be. But I could feel the weight of its hand sinking in and crushing my windpipe. I fought and struggled, but it did nothing. I only survived because it let me go, releasing its grip and slowly walking back to the tub before dissipating altogether. I stumbled through the door back to Mrs. Penderson, grabbing her hand and telling her we had to go. I didn't look back, didn't bother with any belongings. I just knew we had to go. I had been warned, and I was not about to fuck with something so powerful. We ran out the door, and I helped her into my van before we drove off. I don't know what we encountered that night, but I know it let me go on purpose. It wants to be known. Wants me to tell people what happened that night. I spent my life trying to convince people it didn't exist. So it is only just that it gets to show me how very real it is. And it has killed me. The doctor might say it was cancer, but I was completely healthy before that night. When that thing reached my throat, I think it infected my very being. Planted some poison in my cells to make sure I would know exactly how powerful it is. The tumor in my neck has odd tendrils growing out of it, something the doctors had never seen before. I told them I had no idea what it could be, but I know it is the thing's handprint. The mass is exactly where I felt its horrible hand enter me. It left me alive just long enough to understand what it did, and for the fear to fester, but I refused to speak of it, and to let my loved ones think they can stop it from killing me. Now, all I can do is hide it from them. Make sure no one ever goes back to that house and sees such hellspawn. If anyone reads this, know with my full intentions and honor that what I experienced that night was real, and believe me when I say don't ever think that we are alone for a second in this world. I never expected to be haunted. I suppose no one ever does, really. I just always figured that if something like this were to happen to me, I'd at least have some kind of idea it might. Some sort of red flag, like moving into a really old house, disturbing a burial ground, someone cursing me with their dying breath. I didn't get anything like that. I mean, I did move into a new place, sure, but it wasn't old, or even a house for that matter. I moved into a new apartment in the city. The building itself had only been finished a month prior. Nobody had ever lived in the apartment before me, and I was one of the first people in the whole building for that matter. How could I ever have expected a place like that to be haunted? For the record, no, this is not just a case of the new place jitters. Neither is it a I've got a bad feeling or a stuff moving on its own kind of thing. It's an actual full-on visible ghost or spirit or whatever you want to call it, and I saw it the first time I stepped through my front door. It was move-in day. I've done an apartment viewing before moving in, of course, but not of the actual apartment I'd be living in. I suppose that could have come off as a bit suspicious, especially now, with what I know about the place. However, I just figured the building manager didn't want to have to go all the way up to the 10th floor. The floor plan of one of the ones I viewed was exactly the same anyway, so I didn't bother making a fuss. So there I was, carrying my first box into the new place, and the first thing I see after opening the door into my dim, unlit apartment is a shadowy figure huddling in the corner. My first thought was that it was a burglar, but why break into an empty apartment? I hesitantly flicked the light switch on and saw that it was a little girl, maybe around 10 years old, crouched and shaking in the corner. I was confused for a moment, but then I noticed her clothes, a t-shirt and some jeans, a normal sort of outfit for a young girl, but terribly dirty and torn. I figured then that she must have been homeless, squatting in an empty apartment to get out of the cold of the coming winter. I was a bit perplexed as to how she managed to sneak past security, but ultimately just shrugged it off. I approached her, still cowering in the corner. She was shaking like a leaf in apparent fear, her arms wrapped around her head. I felt awful for her, and looking at how skinny and malnourished she seemed, figured I could get her a meal or something before I called CPS. I reached out to her still quivering shoulder, planning on giving it a gentle shake and letting her know I wasn't upset or going to hurt her. When I touched her shoulder, though, I immediately recoiled, surprised at how cold she was. It was like touching a block of dry ice. So cold, it burned. She stopped trembling at my touch and began to turn ever so slowly to face me, almost like she was a bit afraid to look. When our gazes met, though, we both screamed. First her, then me shortly after. Her eyes had been clawed out, roughly, as if by an animal. The girl ran off further into the apartment, and I quickly went the other way, rushing back out the front door and slamming it behind me. I immediately called the building manager, telling him that there was a strange little girl in my apartment. I didn't tell him about the eyes, though, worried that he might think I was crazy and ignore me if I did. Besides, it wasn't like he couldn't see for himself when he came up. However, when he got there and we searched the place top to bottom, we couldn't manage to find her. My building manager decided that she must have slipped out. I reluctantly agreed, doubting that she was able to be that sneaky with her eyes like that. I hadn't exactly considered the possibility of her being a ghost yet, though the thought did occur to me. The idea of it seemed silly at first. However, when I turned away from the front door, just after saying goodbye to my building manager, and found her cowering in the corner once more, I quickly changed my mind. I was a bit scared of her at first. I mean, who wouldn't be? She was an actual ghost. However, it's sort of hard to stay scared of a ghost who seems so scared herself. And when I say scared, I mean absolutely terrified, literally all the time. Other than the corner where I saw her the first time, she has a couple of the other hiding spots throughout the apartment where she'll randomly appear. Under the shelves in the pantry, behind the shower curtain, in the hall closet. She even started hiding under the bed after I finally got the frame set up. That time was a special sort of surprise, as she started screaming as soon as I laid down. I considered moving away at first, but ultimately decided not to. Other than startling me every now and then, she seemed absolutely harmless, unless I tried to get her attention or disturb her in some way. She wouldn't do anything but sit there and tremble. It didn't really seem like something worth breaking my lease over, you know? It's a really nice apartment too, and I would have hated to lose it. I've spent some time since trying to figure out where she came from. I felt really bad for her. She was so young, and those wounds to her eyes. Her death couldn't have been an easy one. I thought that if I knew more about her, maybe I'd be able to help her. Plus, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little worried about why she was so scared all the time. In spite of my efforts, though, I couldn't seem to find any sort of information on her in the slightest. It was a bit odd, seeing as you'd think a death like hers would somehow stand out. Perhaps her body was never found. It's hard to say. Either way, with nothing but dead ends to work with, I simply decided to just let it be. I've had worse living roommates, so I could learn to deal with the little inconveniences of living in a haunted apartment. I wouldn't have even bothered posting anything here, if not for, well, recent developments. Now, I wish I had moved out when I had the chance. A few days ago, a large section of that white popcorn ceiling stuff fell off, revealing what looked to be an attic door. It was made of dark, heavy wood and had a tarnished brass ring for a handle. It makes no sense for it to be there though, of course, considering the fact that I live in an apartment building with nothing above me but another apartment. I tried getting it to open, but it seemed to be locked or something. If there was a way of unlocking it though, it must have been on the other side, as I couldn't see any locking mechanism on mine. I tried to call the building manager about it, but he didn't answer the phone. I tried to go down and see him at the main office on the ground floor, but it was completely empty with no sign of anyone having been there for some time. I even tried knocking on the door to the apartment just above mine on the 11th floor. However, nobody answered the multiple times I tried, so I just assumed it was one of the unoccupied ones. This event started me thinking about all the other odd things I had noticed about the building, things that I had brushed off before, but now seemed to be neon signs telling me something was up. You see, I shouldn't be the only one living here, yet I've never once ran into any of the other residents. It's not just that though. Nobody I've mentioned my building to has ever even heard of the place. I was able to find public records on the building when I looked, but still, the city isn't exactly all that big, and new buildings are far from common. I talked to a lot of people at libraries and such when I was trying to find out information on the little girl, and none of them had heard about it. I initially wrote it off as an odd coincidence, but seriously, how could that be? Even in the spite of this, I didn't feel like I needed to leave. Besides, with my building manager having seemingly vanished, it wasn't like I could get a hold of the paperwork to properly move anyway. It wasn't until today though that I realized that, since the attic door had appeared, I hadn't seen the ghost of the little girl even once. By then though, it was far too late. This morning, I woke to the sound of the attic door rattling like crazy, the sound of the brass handle smacking over and over again against the wood like a frantic victim trying to escape. I peeked out of my bedroom just once, but I didn't look long. The moment I stuck my head out the door, the shaking stopped and I heard the distinct sound of a latch being unlocked. I don't know why, but I immediately got the gut feeling I didn't want to see what was coming through. I slammed my bedroom door shut and locked it, hastily pushing a couple of shelves in front of it as a makeshift barricade. I wished now that I had made a break for the front door, but it's too late now either way. Who knows if I would have made it out anyways. I heard the attic door open shortly after I finished putting the last shelf into place. Since then, I've heard nothing. Not a single sound from either inside or outside the apartment. Not a car horn, a bird call, or even the sound of wind. Just nothing. It's been hours now, and I still can't hear anything but a completely dead silence. My bedroom doesn't even have a single window, so I have no way of checking what's going on outside. I've tried to call for help on my phone, but I can't seem to get a cell signal. Weirdly enough, I have Wi-Fi, but nobody has responded to my emails either. Not my friends or family members, my building manager, or anybody else. It's funny, as I'm writing this, I just realized I have no idea what my building manager even looks like, even though I've seen him face to face and I've talked to him multiple times. Maybe he never even existed. Who knows at this point? I think I'm probably going to try and make a break for it. I could try and wait whatever this is out, but I have no guarantee that this will ever end. When I think back on the gaunt figure of the ghost of that poor little girl, I find myself wondering how long she might have waited for. I want to give this a try before I lose any strength. At least I'll feel like I have a slightly better chance this way. I don't know if anyone will even read this. If my other attempts at communication are any indication, then probably not. However, if this somehow manages to actually get posted, can you please do me a favor? If someone on here happens to post about their apartment being haunted by the ghost of a woman with her eyes scratched out, please tell them to get out while they can. Thanks for watching, Wolfpack. If you want to catch me by the fire next time, I upload every weekend including Friday. Don't forget to like the video as it helps me out more than you know. If you want to submit your story, head down to the description. Now, here's Roken to howl you off to sleep. Have beautiful nightmares.